Thank you. I wish to congratulate the Minister of Finance for a well-crafted budget. And I hope that every Guyanese would take the time to familiarize themselves with the aspects of the budget. I hope that they will not succumb to impressions that are formed secondhand, particularly impressions that are designed to distract attention from the key positive elements of this budget. And that is all that the opposition has been doing since the budget was presented. They have, I thought they had a glorious opportunity in Parliament to listen carefully to the budget, to make notes on the, even if they did not have a copy of the budget speech immediately, but to make notes on the many features, elements of the budget, and then their comments would have been more constructive, or even if they're critical, that they would have done so from a position of a more in-depth analysis. What we saw, the comments that we saw coming from the opposition for the past several days have been nothing new. And it just proves the point that we've been making, that we have an opposition bereft of ideas. An opposition does not have a vision, that is stuck in rhetoric of destruction and a predictable rhetoric. So we didn't hear this year so far the rhetoric on race, that it's a racist budget, but we've heard the traditional things. Oh, too heavily focused on infrastructure. It's a budget for friends and family of the People's Progressive Party. Too little for, in fact, nothing in the budget for poor people, that it is a bourgeois budget. We're spending too much on Gaisuko. These are, even if we didn't present this budget, you would have heard those comments, because they've been with this opposition so much. There's nothing, if you scan all of the comments made by every member of the opposition and their allies in different parts of society, you would not see a single analysis of the budget. All you would be getting from them is the same old rhetoric. So today I'm not going to spend all my time here at this press conference speaking about the positive elements of the budget. The ministers have already been doing so, and I know by now the media has studied the budget. So I'm just going to respond to a few of the things that ordinary people, maybe people in the street, from what I've discussed with them, have bought into some of the rhetoric that they've heard. And they may be repeating this. So we have made it clear that sustained management and careful management of the financial resources of Guyana must be a hallmark of every government, particularly in this era when we've started to receive the windfall revenue from the oil and gas sector. that we have to be very careful that we manage these resources in a manner that don't commit us to long-term recurrent costs that, should our fortunes change, particularly in revenue inflow, that we'd be unable to sustain. And so you've seen the budget crafted with that in mind. So a significant growth in capital expenditure, but a tamer growth in recurrent expenditure. And the capital expenditure is focused on building productive capacity for future growth in the non-oil sector, and also to bring greater comfort to people. So again, you would see significant investments in roads, bridges, and other economic infrastructure, the power plant, etc. These will have a huge impact on people, but I'll come to that in a moment. We have nearly $100 billion in this budget for miscellaneous roads and urban roads. $100 billion in the budget. This is leaving out the highways. We're going to, what does this represent? It represents, on average, about maybe 2,600 to 3,000 community roads that would be built this year. Forget the highways. So when you see $100 billion in a $1 trillion budget, it's a lot of money. It's about just under 10% of the budget. But it represents nearly 3,000 roads that would be built in the communities across Guyana. Whether you live in urban areas or you live in rural areas, you're going to get your roads built. And this is a key request of our people. It is also essential for many of these communities because they don't have proper community infrastructure. It's solving a problem in many of these communities and improving the quality of life of people in those communities. So when you say that the budget has nothing for people, in all the communities across Guyana, and I'm left out even the hinterland budget allocation of over $5 billion. But if you include those, communities right across Guyana are going to see tens of thousands of Guyanese are going to see improved infrastructure within their communities, leaving out the highways. So how could you say the budget has nothing for ordinary people? Secondly, the highways themselves. So you would see, I can list how much money would be spent on highways, bridges, the power plant. In this budget alone, we have nearly $80 billion of a $1 trillion budget, nearly 8% of the budget for one project, the gas to energy project. But when that project is completed, that expenditure does not have to be made again. And then what does this project represent for the country? It represents 300 megawatts of power, twice as much power as GPL produces now. The people of this country will save over $100 million US dollars per annum. So because of the cut in electricity prices by 50%, So over a 10 years period, they would save, Guyanese would spend, have to pay $1 billion less in electricity bill if we extrapolate that. And over a 20-year period, that alone, the savings would be more than the cost of the project to people. That same project, $80 billion in this budget, will also allow us to start producing and exporting cooking gas for the first time ever, and would represent a significant lowering of the cost of cooking gas, which will impact on cost of living. So $80 billion in the budget, yes, or nearly 8% of the budget on one project. But the project represents a major movement forward for this country, securing stable power, cheaper power, stable, and creating a new export industry in cooking gas. And the bridge, we have $260 million, so a significant part of that will be reflected here in the budget, the bridge connecting Region 3 with this region. But just imagine if we save 1 hour per day and the lives of 30,000 people who used the bridge and the highway, 1 hour per day, and you cost that at $1,000 per hour. That is saved time, because that's how you calculate it. That's if they travel 30 days a month, that's $30,000 per month you save, not save, but you give back to people, because when you calculate, this is time they can spend on something else. So they can earn, say, $1,000 an hour if they earn $8,000 a day or something like that. 30,000 per person. Multiply that by 12 months in the year. Multiply by 30,000 individuals. Imagine the billions of dollars in time saved just by using this infrastructure. And we know this. We live this every single day. So the money is in the budget. It caused the budget to grow a bit, but it is solving a problem that our people face. But it has a major economic benefit to them too, because every hour saved, imagine 30,000 man-hours saved per day, means the 30,000 man-hours could be put in other productive ventures or for recreational purposes. You give back that time to people. And so I can go down the list of capital projects that we have and how they're going to change people's lives. I will not do so today because they said too much money on infrastructure. Well, it's infrastructure that will impact not just people's lives, but how will that change that bridge, the single bridge and the 4-lane highway, the Schoonard Highway, will change the whole of Region 3. It means suddenly all the things that you could not have done on that side of the river, you can do now. You can have a container terminal on that side of the river, which is happening now, a massive investment. You see the opening up of the lands all the way from Wales to Freedom Hoop, the industrialization of Region 3, because people can land a container on the other side of the river and would be able to bring it over on the bridge, which they couldn't have done on the floating structure that we currently have. And so it has an economic impact too on the region. So when the opposition says government spending too much on infrastructure, as though we must spend every cent on eating it up, and they have this philosophy. eat every cent and forget about tomorrow. We cannot do this as a country. We cannot. And I'm going to come back to that issue. So another criticism of the budget is that we're spending too much money on, in fact, let me go after this one first. The $3,000 that we gave to the pensioners is a small amount. And we wish we could have given a lot more to pensioners. But look at our record. First of all, I remember the early days when old age pension was not given to everyone. There was a means test. If you were earning in the 90s over 75 Guyana dollars, you were excluded from getting old age pension, because there was a means test as to who qualified for old age pension. The PPP removed the means test so that every Guyanese who attain a certain age can benefit from old age pension. That's the first point. Old age pension is not a salary. It was designed it's not contributory. There is a contributory pension when people work, they make payments like the NIS, and then they get a pension, an NIS pension, which is a contributory pension. In this case, every citizen of our country over a certain age gets the pension, old age pension. Many countries in the world, particularly in the developing world and developed world, do not have this feature. They don't get that. Our old age pension now, as low as it is higher than the wages of workers, monthly wages, in some parts of the world. In some parts of the world. Old age pension is designed to support, not to replace, support income levels for elderly people who you would assume would have had savings or getting a contributory pension. So that's the idea. So APNU is criticizing this $3,000 for the increase in old age pension for this year. In 2014, when the last year of the PPP government, the old age pension was $13,125. In 5 years of APNU, it went to $20,500. So that's an increase in the 5 years of $7,375. If you divide that by 5, a person got an increase. The old age pensioners got an increase of $1,475 Guyana dollars per year. $1,475. That is APNU's track record of giving an increase, average increase on old age pension of $1,475. Imagine they're criticizing $3,000, but I'm going to get to that in a moment. This was in the context of a massive increase in taxes. They increased the tax on water. They put the VAT on water, on electricity, on data, on foodstuff. They also removed the water subsidy that the pensioners had under the PPP, and they removed the electricity subsidy. So not only did they give the pensioners a $1,475 increase in their pension on average per year, but they removed the water and the electricity subsidy, effectively negating even that sum that they got. Because I'm sure you were paying 1,000 more than that in electricity bill and water subsidy. So what did we say? We said in our manifesto, we want to double old age pension. We've increased it so far by 75%. So those who are talking about 3,000 now need to understand that old age pension has increased by 15,500 since the PPP got into office, nearly double the amount that APNU had, just over $7,375 in the 5 years. We have more than double the increase that they had since then. Secondly, we made it clear that by next year, so you can predict what the old age pension next year will be, because it was 25 and we promised to double it. So it's 36,000 now, it will go to 41,000 next year. That's consistent with our manifesto promise that we made. Now, what does the 3,000, how much the 3,000, if you multiply $3,000 by 76,000 people by 12 months in the year, it gives you $2.7 billion that the pensioners are getting now, more than last year. But if you take what they will get next year, or what it's costing us so far, it's costing us already $14.1 billion more per year than 2020. Because that is how much we have increased it by increasing it by 13,000, in fact, not 13,000, $15,500 per month more. Since 2020, it's costing now $14.1 billion more. So you have to look at the total promise, not the individual year. The promise was to double old age pension in 5 years. Did this PPP government, has it been keeping its promise? So everybody gone now, oh, I see Kaichon, the whole opposition in this, oh, it's only 3,000 this year. They forget that we said we'll double it. We moved it from 25, and now it's 36, and it will get to 41 by 2025. We fulfill our promise to the pensioners. APNU had said they would double old age pension in their manifesto in 100 days in 2015. They failed to double it. In fact, they just gave people a $1,475 Guyana dollars increase per year. And this is the party that now criticizes us for giving too little to the pensioners. Apart from that, we have restored the water subsidy. We have restored the electricity subsidy to the pensioners this year. We're going to restore that. So water, electricity subsidy to pensioners have been restored. We have given directly to the pensioners in cash grant nearly 75 in every year. 2021 they got a cash grant, 2022 and 2023 outside of the pension, equivalent to another 4 months of pension under APNU. So our record on pension payments, this is a big item in the budget, and you have to be careful about it, and we are measured. We're not going to increase it by a sum that we can't sustain in the long run. But we are keeping our promise. And our promise was to double old age pension in 5 years. APNU did not fulfill their promise. So when they talk about $3,000 now, I see this. It's pure nonsense because they don't look at what has happened since we got into office and what we promised. And the other things too. We have not only restored water subsidy and pension and electricity subsidy, we're doing that now, but we have removed the VAT on electricity. All the massive tax increases, we've reduced it. Electricity, water, data, food items, everything else. We have vastly changed the situation with healthcare. Because I know of many pensioners who did not or could not get their medical supplies because there are none in the hospitals in the 5 years under APNU, when we had $10 billion of drugs that expired in the bond. When we had $10 billion that we had to burn up basically when we got into office because they bought expired drugs and just sitting in the bond. So on healthcare, they've also seen major shifts in pension. So when you talk about crocodile tears, APNU is the personification of crocodile tears. About now, they belatedly have great concerns for the pensioners of this country. When they took away the water subsidy from pensioners, shamelessly took it away from the elderly in this country, and electricity subsidy. They said they couldn't afford it. You remember that? They couldn't afford it, but they could have afforded to increase in the same year money to eat more in government or to buy more vehicles. The same amount of money that it costs us to fund the water subsidy to the pensioners, they increased the budget for vehicles, buying more vehicles for government agencies by twice that sum in 1 year. Those were more important than the pensioners. So that is that it relates to pension. Next, they said education. So education now is $135 billion, 11.8% of the budget. And people need to look at this. With education and healthcare, over 20% of the budget goes to these areas. Now, in 2020, education expenditure was $51.4 billion. In this year's budget, it's $135 billion. $84 billion increase. So people want to know where the increases are. Well, here is a huge increase. 164% increase in education. And again, is this consistent with our plan? When we said that we made it very clear in our manifesto that the oil resources will be spent in some specific areas. One of which was infrastructure for the future. And you see that here. I just explained some elements of it. Secondly, education. So we've had this massive growth in education expenditure. We planned also to make university education free. So I've heard comments about, oh, Gold Scholarship is getting the same amount of money as UG. And aren't we de-emphasizing the University of Guyana? and that somehow the Gold Scholarship Program might be a program for friends and family of the PPP. So we have so far, since we got into office, we have now 21,000 students studying on the Gold program. That's a lot it's a public recruitment program. It covers all 10 regions in the country. And these scholarships were given not to aliens, not to people from, say, Mars or some other remote planet in the solar system. They're given to Guyanese people. And if you look at the range of people and the regions and the ethnic makeup of the scholarships, you will see it's representative of our country. In fact, the person we brought back to run the program was a former Vice Chancellor of the University of Guyana. He's Nigerian, Professor Opodere, and he's running that program. That program has changed the lives of many people. It's different from the University of Guyana in its speed, its reach because it's online, and range of subjects. The subject matters, like nearly 180 different subject matters or courses. And it's available to our people. It complements the University of Guyana. The University of Guyana produces has an output of 3,500 persons per year. We will now get up to about 27,000 by the end of this year in Gold Scholarship Program, and close to 35,000 people by end 2025. The promise in the manifesto was 20,000 new scholarships. We will end up having about 35,000 people on Gold Scholarship alone, overperforming. And these are to our people, Guyanese people, not aliens. This program is also helping through remedial classes for people who would have never qualified to get into a degree program or a technical program. It's assisting with them. People should be happy about this, not run this down. In fact, I've contrasted this with the APNU Scholarship Program, where they have, for only less than 1,000 scholarships were given in 5 years, and ministers were getting, and their families were getting the bulk of these scholarships. That was for friends and family. So we have a lot of friends and family now, 21,000 of them, and I hope that the Gold Scholarship Program would listen to Amanza Walton and the others, because she believes that you're wasting time. You shouldn't get a scholarship. You shouldn't get a scholarship. And that program is for friends and family of the People's Progressive Party. Apart from that, thousands have been trained through the Board of Industrial Training. We have another 4,500 people last year, women, who've been trained through WIN program, the WIN program. We are now, this year's budget, we have over $500 million for Hospitality Training Institute. We're building a Guyana Technical Training College that will train more people in the oil and gas sector. Consistent with what we said, we're investing in our people. In capacity building, large number of training. University of Guyana, because we value it, that's why we're making it free. And But it's not only through the University of Guyana will we deliver our training programs. We will deliver training programs through several institutions. And though I wasn't even exhaustive in the list that I mentioned to you, because we need to train our people urgently now. The scale of the needs are great, and therefore we have to explore all means of training our people. That is how we approach education in this country. Now, they said $4 billion only for the university. That's $4 billion in subvention. We are also writing off potentially $18 billion in past loans. And that's all in this year's budget. So, effectively, as I explained the last time, we've started, for those who took loan in the earlier period and they're serving, they don't have to pay back their loans. So this is a major policy. So what did they say? Oh, we're spending $6 billion on Gaisuko, so we should have put it more to the university. Well, the $6 billion on Gaisuko is to keep an industry going that APNU was bent on destroying when they sent home 7,000 sugar workers without a social safety net, no income whatsoever. It's keeping those. But you would realize that they avoid certain things in the budget because of the racism of the PNC. So we are, in Linden this year, we budgeted in this very same budget that they complain about $6 billion to support a productive sector of the economy, sugar, which is vital, not only for the employment aspect, but for the other services it provides to the people of this country through maintenance of coastal infrastructure to prevent flooding. And therefore, we spend less in other areas to do the same thing. You know, the budget is less for other areas. For productive activity, they complain. But in this year's budget, we have $4 billion to subsidize electricity in Linden. And we have $874 million to subsidize electricity in Kwakwani. In Region 10 alone, we have nearly $5 billion in the budget this year to subsidize electricity in these areas. Those communities pay a fraction that the people in the rest of the country pay, because there's a state subsidy to it. All of us who live in Georgetown or Berbice or anywhere else in the country, we pay a different rate, and they pay a lower rate because the state has been subsidizing it. But nobody speaks about this $5 billion that goes to a subsidy. But they have big concerns about the $6 billion that is going to Gaisuko to support a productive activity. It's the racism again. And then saying, oh, it should have never happened. But the crocodile tears again. It was APNU that increased UG fees by 35% in 2018. This is the same party that says, oh, you're not doing this fast enough, making university education free. But when they had the reins of government, like what they did with the pensioners, they took away the water subsidy, they took away the electricity subsidy, etc. They also increased fees to students going to the University of Guyana by 35%. So again, crocodile tears. Crocodile tears. These are the three biggest concerns they've expressed about the budget. Too much on infrastructure, university, and trying to pit the gold program against UG, and then the pensioners. These are some of the things that they have mentioned. Now, outside of that, I see this question, and no doubt this will come up, about how much of the budget. So about 60% of the budget is financed from revenue, which is significant because we've seen a significant growth in revenue. And the rest through debt. So if you look at the debt, the stock of debt, our total stock of debt at last year. So I see this headline, Guyana plunges 23% deeper in debt. Government now owes $4.5 billion US dollars. So is this a fact? Are we worsening our debt profile globally? And the answer is a resounding no. I've gone through this at great length in the past. So at the end of 2023, the stock of debt was $4.5 billion at the end of 2023. This is all the debt we borrowed historically, etc. $4.5 billion US dollars, of which $1.8 billion is external debt. So in 1990, our gross domestic product was $300 million US dollars, approximately $300 million US dollars. And we owed $2.1 billion US dollars external debt at that time. Remember these figures. $2.1 billion US dollars of external debt in the 90s, early 90s, with an economy the size $300 million. We have a $22 billion economy today, and our debt is $1.8 billion. It's lower, external debt is lower than the debt in the 90s, when our economy was 60-odd times smaller. The whole economy was 60-odd times smaller than what it is today, maybe nearly 70 times smaller than what it is today. So the fact of the matter is that in spite of our borrowing over this period, our stock of debt to the external world is less than in 1990 when Abner was in office. And this is all the borrowing for the roads and everything else that we spoke about so far. So that is where we were. That's where we are at this in last year, and the rest is $2.7 billion. It's domestic debt. That is domestic debt through the issuance of T-bills, etc. But the external debt has been the big issue. So I can go on. I don't want to belabor this point because I have dealt with this before. This is also false. And no doubt you will hear all about it. Our future revenue, if we forecast based on oil production, even for the approved projects, and Whiptail, which will be approved, if we only factor in production at those levels, at say current oil prices and at the volume that we expect to produce from those projects, the revenue for the state in the outer years, that is maybe by 2028, 2030, we could be 5.7 to $6 billion. Right now, our revenue in 2025 is forecast to be about $2.6 billion, which is more than the entire external debt. We have some of the lowest debt service figures in the world, debt to revenue, debt to GDP, debt to as a percentage of the budget, debt service as a percentage of the budget in the world. Some of the lowest figures. And we've made it clear that even though some of these projects are financed from debt, that they will pay back for themselves, like the gas to energy project will pay back for itself. But even if it didn't, the burden on the fiscal is not, it would not make it unsustainable. So that may be another criticism that they're coming up with. Now, clearly, we're hearing different things. They said nothing for ordinary people in this budget. We've gone beyond maybe I should deal with this first. So how we're trying to tackle public health issues, but in a way that is finite and the expenditure doesn't become recurrent. So apart from the hospital. So you saw in this year's budget a number of initiatives that are funded. We know sight is important. It changes the quality of life of people. When we invested in the ophthalmology hospital in Berbice, APNU ran it down. But we got thousands of people, tens of thousands of people had operations when in the PPP, earlier PPP government, where we sent them off to Cuba or we did it here. We now have a program in this year's budget that will see every pensioner and every school child being screened. They'll get a voucher. They can redeem the voucher in the public hospital where they get their eyes tested or privately. We've spoken to the private people, and money set aside for them to get their glasses if they need glasses. For every school child in this country, every child and every pensioner can have that. This is apart from their pension. They get their eye screen and they'll get glasses. This is important for us, our children. The other one is cervical cancer. We believe that if caught early, and it can only be done by screening, then we can basically intervene early to save people. So we've set aside $1 billion to build out the capacity for intervention, upgrade our capacity in the public health system, because we know once we start screening, we're going to find more cases, and we're building that capacity. $1 billion has gone towards that initiative. And another $2.8 billion where every adult woman in this country will get a voucher to go and screen for cervical cancer. So they can go to the private hospitals, etc., because the rate they charge is about $8,000 there. And so they will get a voucher for $8,000. Now this costs us $2.8 billion and $1 billion for the capacity. That's $3.8 billion. The spectacle program, it's $1.8 billion. How many persons would be this help? So we have 350,000 women who would be eligible, 205 young people for this spectacle program. And then if you take half of the pensioners who are not women, who would also be eligible for this spectacle program, you're talking about nearly 600,000 people. 600,000 different persons, not the same, because you would have some who will benefit from both initiatives, spectacle like women, and also from the screening for cervical cancer. But I'm talking about children and women. That group alone is 555,000 people. In a population of maybe 900,000 people, nearly 600,000 will be able to get a health-related screening. So when this is done, we move on to something else. So it's a finite expenditure. That's why we're not putting it as a recurrent expenditure on the budget. Apart from this, however, we're investing in $600 million US in the 12 hospitals. We're building now, we're starting a training program. We're looking to recruit people to man these hospitals. We're focusing on improved management of hospitals. We're focusing on more medical supplies, etc. So the nearly $130 billion in the budget for health care, which grew from $51 billion under APNU in 2020, a massive increase again there. It's not for aliens, it's for people. So when you say you don't see anything in the budget, all of these initiatives are for the people of this country. So if people living in every region in this country can now have access to modern facilities, CT scan, to get a CT scan if you live in the hinterland, you have to come to Georgetown. If you live in some regions in this country, you have to come to Georgetown, pay for that. All of that will be part of the universal health care that we are providing, and that's being funded from here. So it would have a big impact on women, on children, on elderly people, because we're taking care closer to them. And you recall the Children and Maternal Hospital would change the way we address these issues. So you would recall a third element of what we said we want to spend the oil resources on. I mentioned education, healthcare, and then vulnerable groups. And so you see, again, a reflection of that. The part-time jobs, that's $10 billion, $5 billion grant for people, cost of living interventions, the income tax threshold, which takes out 13,000 people now wouldn't have to pay taxes anymore. Everyone benefits, but they come out of the tax net. All of these are going to make a big, big difference in people's lives. So when they say they don't see, I don't want to enumerate everything here today, but when they don't see anything in the budget for people, these are specific interventions designed to assist targeted groups of individuals in our country. More people will be working as our economy is going, expanding. More people will be trained. We're providing more opportunities to them. Not necessarily handouts like APNU want until you can't fund it anymore. I just would like to, on housing. So $78 billion being spent on housing this year's budget. So if you had to look, people say $1 trillion, and where is all this money going? APNU said friends and family. But if you look at it quickly, where is it going? Are these important things for us? Education, as I said before, $135 billion. Education. We are now, our per capita spending on education is starting to approximate, and we need to get up to OECD, the lower end of the OECD spending, because you gotta spend more on education generally, so 135 billion, that's 10% of the budget. Education, another 10% or so. Health, 129 billion. Public sector wages and salaries, $121.4 billion. So nothing in the budget for people, but you have over 10%, or well, nearly 10% of the budget here for public sector wages and salaries. That's a third component. 40.7 billion old age pension, 224 billion for public works, of which roads and bridges are 204. And I mentioned to you like 100 billion alone is for community roads. So that would help thousands of people in their communities directly. 95 billion for energy, of which 80 billion is the gas to energy project. 78 billion for housing. So when you add all of this up, guess how much you already at? $826 billion. People ask, where is this 1 trillion? On those components alone, that's $826 billion. But housing, you recall we said we want to do 50,000 new house lots. APNU didn't do this. Who do you think this investment is being made for? Definitely not for the friends and family that got all the land under APNU. It's made for 50,000, or promised 50,000 Guyanese will receive a piece of land on which they have proper infrastructure. So that investment is not made for aliens again, but they don't see anything in that. Then if you add to the 826, another 90.6 billion for the security sector. 97 billion for agriculture. So we already made it clear, DNI, 40 mobile pumps this year will cost us a lot of money, billions of dollars, so that our capacity to manage floods, we can deploy mobile pumps. The Hope-like canals that will be funded from the money that we received through the sale of forest carbon. But it's all part of the budget. We have to reflect it in the budget. A lot of those expenditures are there. We have $2 billion to bring in Crabwood Creek area to start bringing in 40,000 acres of land into productive use that would add to our agricultural drive in the country. So when you add those additional sectors, agriculture and security sector, to the that's already $1 trillion. Already $1 trillion. And then when you add the Amerindian allocation, the Ministry of Culture and Youth and Sport, another $8.9 billion, and debt service, which is $44 billion, that's the budget there for you. So they're asking, where is all this money going? Those are the heads. Those are the spending and the heads. And it's going to important things for us. So what is important? The transformative issues for security in this country. We believe that we have to have greater security for the people of this country, so we're investing in this already. So we have billions of dollars for the Safe Country program, $2 billion for Safe Country program, the National ID program, the digitization of the Ministry of Home Affairs and all of its allied functions, the digitization of the airport, the e-gates, so paperless airport. All of this is part of the modernization agenda that will be about $5-6 billion this year. So APNU believes we must not do any of these things. Take every cent and just hand it out. Take every cent. That's their philosophy. Take every cent. Don't modernize, forget modernizing. Don't look after security. Don't upgrade the facilities available to our police, etc., the tools available to them. Don't upgrade the army. The army recapitalization is a significant part of this budget too. There's significant expenditures here to expand the defensive capability of our army and to make sure that we can better police our exclusive economic zone. They don't see any of these things in the budget. Oh, the budget is a bourgeois budget. Pure nonsense. The budget has incentives for private sector growth, and the biggest incentive for private sector growth is confidence in the economy. And you can't engender confidence with the way they speak. You can't engender confidence to do that. Secondly, it's creating a policy environment, a low-tax policy environment. They increase 200-odd taxes and fees. We have not increased any taxes since we got into office. In fact, we've gone the other direction. We've gone the other direction. So a low-tax environment for our people and also private sector encourages growth. We encourage investments by removing what APNU had, the VAT on machinery and equipment, charging people on capital goods, where they're investing to expand the productive capacity of our economy. All of that has been done. That's why people believe it's a pro-private sector budget, but it's pro-poor too. We're tackling the housing expenditure. If you improve public health care and public education, who benefits most? Because richer people can afford private health care and private education. But if you now the services that are produced in the private sector that you have to pay for, CT scan, ultrasound, etc., if you can get these in good quality public institutions, you also ensure that poor people can have better quality care. Their children can have better quality education. They can get a scholarship. That's the investment in people. So these are just some of the issues. I'm not going to go more on this. You would have next week you'll hear our comments on this, more on the budget. Let me just stop there. I think I'm going on too long. I haven't finished as yet, though. Oh, that's on the budget, and then that's on the budget. So it's just like I was hoping to get. We were hoping that you can engage in a discussion on policy. We can't. It's just rhetoric. And it also, it's a lack of capacity in the opposition to really focus on some of the things that we hope they would have focused on. I'm not, as I said before, don't go into this because you're going to hear the ministers deal with their sectors greater length. I wanted, someone brought this to my attention. I'm not going to go through this because a vindictive editorial from Stabroek News. It says 4 guys sitting around a coffee table. It's vindictive. And Stabroek News, generally the newspaper is fair and balanced and everything else. It's these guest editors. And you should have a policy like Shabral to name the guest editors. He names his guest editors. Some of them are vile, but at least you know who they are. So these guest editors go and cuss you out all the time, and that's fine with us. But they said one thing, so a couple of things. And that we cause, the PPP cause, a filthy nation from Crabwood Creek to Charity. And secondly, that we are plain lucky, and it's dumb luck rather than intelligence that we are where we are today. And then another saying that I claim at my press conference that only because I was in charge, so much was done in a short time. I never did that. So that's a lie. And then they want us to compare our oil industry with Suriname. So let me deal with a couple of these things. So as I said before, this is a vile, vindictive editorial, and it keeps coming from, I think it's one of the APNU people, because I see a pattern. Every week this happens. And as I said before, we'll respond. But just this question of plain luck. So they believe there is no room for policy making. It's plain luck. If you have money, because oil now, you can run anything. Anybody can do this. So there's no role for policy makers. It's just, anything can go now, and you will be successful. So if we say it's plain luck now that the oil and gas sector is here, so we were plainly unlucky when we got into office in 1992. And you had to deal with one of the biggest debts in the world, one of the highest rates of poverty, 87% of our population living below the poverty line, destroyed infrastructure, blackouts lasting 2 weeks at a time, no roads, nothing to drive on. We didn't have foreign currency to pay our bills. We had triple-digit inflation, the fiscal deficit, 25% of GDP, etc. It was all, we were very unlucky when we got in there. So, if we were unlucky then, it had to be policy making that by 2015, even before we found oil, we had a stable macroeconomy, the reserves had built up, single-digit inflation, our debt to GDP ratio had come down to 45%, down from 913%. This was before oil. And our debt servicing to about 10% of revenue, down from over 100% of revenue. We had started once again to have electricity continuously and more money spent in the school. It was, if we're unlucky then, it took policy making to get there. On the oil and gas sector, APNU likes to claim this windfall, but we work towards it too. Why do you think it was Janet Jagan who issued this license? And throughout that whole period, we encourage investments. Suriname, CGX started. We had a force majeure declared by ExxonMobil because of that incident with Suriname. And it took us 7 years to resolve it by going to the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea and settling the maritime boundary once and for all aboard a maritime boundary. And that everything resumed. So oil and the policy is not by chance. But also, we've seen a lot of countries with oil resources of a magnitude significantly greater than we have received or we will ever receive. And they have made a mess of it. Our neighbor, because of bad policy making. Our neighbors in Venezuela would be a good example of this. But we've seen it around the world. I would say APNU, given policy making in APNU, so given their track record of destruction, 28 years, and at the end of the period we were poorer after 28 years than when they took over in the 60s, when Guyana was seen as the Singapore of the Caribbean. They took us down to Haiti. We were competing with Haiti at the bottom of the Western Hemisphere. That's their track record on economic management. And they had great windfalls too. You remember the 70s when the commodity prices tripled, the sugar prices tripled and everything else. We're swimming in money in the 80s, all squandered. We had a whole, let me don't go into that, that would take too long. So that's all squandered. And then the 5 years again, we started the decline. They started going after the productive sectors. Almost every productive sector in the economy saw a decline in production because they started taxing equipment and everything else. So it's not by chance or plain luck that you manage resources. You have to have a philosophy. It has to be underscored or underpinned by a strong sense of where you want to get and economics. And so this person must be from APNU. There they think everything is based on luck. Whatever falls from the sky, you know, you just set your hat and receive it and spend it out and everything else. It's an APNU. I take a wager that this is an APNU person writing this editorial. This comes straight out of the bowels of APNU, that it's about luck. With all the oil money in the world, I would say if it wouldn't have been such a disaster, we'd give them 1 year with the oil money or 2 years, just again, where it would be a disaster for this country. They prove it in the 5 years. Disaster. And you will see what will happen. You will see what will happen again. That they demonstrated over and over again. You have to manage in a way to do this. And so I didn't know that a picture that the president posted on his page would have generated so much vile comments about that. You can't read our names. No member of the civil society is there. They clearly don't know how budgets. When I work with Chedi Jagan when I was there. The president discusses with the Minister of Finance and a few people the budget. That's it. You set framework. You discuss the framework. You have to do that at that level. At least we did it. I don't know who in APNU was discussing this, that decided that they could take away the children grant, and that was a sane policy and was promoting welfare. At least you would never have that in our government, because we don't care 4 pitches or not where we're meeting, but that will never happen, or take away water subsidy from pensioners or put on these taxes. That will never happen because we take our leadership seriously. If you don't want to do that, that's your business. We take leadership seriously, so we believe that it's important enough to have a discussion on policy and on our promises that we made to the people of this country when we contested elections with the Minister of Finance to see that it's reflective in the budget. Absolutely no apology. But this thing about, they compare his results to those of Suriname over the past few years. Suriname hasn't started producing oil at scale, and we don't know as yet. So I see a lot of comparisons with Suriname, and I think we stand up favorably in the comparisons. We stand up very favorably. I'm not going to go much more. A vindictive APNU editorial. I may just want to end there. Thank you.
So now, hello? Yes. Mr. Jagdeo and Shibral, sir, could you elaborate a bit more on what are the plans to develop or improve the defensive capacity of the GDF? And secondly, where did you arrive at the figure of Guyana's population being about 900,000? I saw you flag that. And thirdly, what exactly are some of the plans to properly resource the University of Guyana to help pay lecturers more and improve its capacity to probably offer a fair percentage of programs comparable to goal? And
the last one then is what a fair
and comparable salaries, and also fair and comparable programs like goal is available through goal. And relatedly to goal, could you say what is the dropout rate, if you like, about how
I
about
don't know fair and comparable salaries to goal
no
because okay, all right.
fair salaries
Okay.
and comparable programs
Okay,
to
comparable.
goal?
Oh, fair
Yeah.
salaries and comparable
Yes.
program. Okay.
And about how many? What's your dropout rate out of goal? You was talking about number of persons registered. How many has actually decided not to pursue the program anymore? And lastly, what has the Guyana government been told about the number of officials who have been sent on leave from the Caribbean Development Bank? What's the reason?
Okay.
That's it for now.
Army. So normally, it's a block allocation for the Army, and we tend not to go into great details on these issues, but I can say to you, like, for example, we're in discussion with Bell for the purchase of 4 smaller helicopters, which would assist not just the Army, but the police in training and also policing, because they'd be equipped with a whole range infrared technology, etc., so that in case the police would also have a greater capacity. But things along those lines, it's more defensive capacity. You know already we're exploring, we have with India a line of credit for some maritime assets to ensure that we better police our exclusive economic zone. These are just some elements of it, but generally, it's to better equip our security forces. You're not going to get more from me on that. Yes, the Caribbean Development Bank. I was trying. I saw the story, but I'm not aware of that we have been briefed about anything. In fact, I Googled around the region last night. I was checking, maybe over 4 this morning or so, but I don't see anything coming out from the region. You were the only person who carried a story.
The Caribbean Media Corporation also carried.
Oh, they carried a story. I did not find anything in detail about it. So, no, I don't. I don't know. You probably have more information than we have at this point in time. So I know the press conference was postponed, and we're going to try to find out a bit more about what's going on, and from official sources. But
Aren't you worried that the government will be kept to the dark as a borrowing nation?
No. I think it's just might be a timing issue. The media tends to even get reports ahead because they deal with leaks of the issue.
UG?
On UG, compared to goal. So first of all, there are different structures. So fair salaries, the goal program doesn't offer the educational services. This is done by institutions abroad, and the prices are negotiated. And I must say, if you look at the expenditure per person, it is way below that of the University of Guyana, based on the prices that are negotiated. These institutions have to go through the quality and the review of the curriculum to the technical staff at Gold, because Professor Opede and the others do that. So they have to have a certain standard before you can be chosen to offer educational services. That's one. So it doesn't come up with questions of salary. We don't pay salary. We pay a fee per student. The salaries of the staff at Goal, if you look at the administrative arrangement of Goal, I doubt they have more than maybe 20, 30 persons. But they're delivering the educational services and supervising it to 21,000 people. So if you look at their administrative spending, it would be significantly lower than the University of Guyana. Significantly lower than that. So, and as I said before, since it's online, it's the reach right across the country, which you may need to go to a physical campus, etc., more with UG for some subjects. So I don't think you can do a straight line comparison. You can do a straight line comparison. It's very, very difficult. We need both programs. We need the University of Guyana. The University of Guyana also, we believe, must consolidate, but this is a personal view. I believe they must consolidate around a number of programs that are high quality, not seek to every time somebody goes there to start a new program, then they don't have a lecturer or something else, then they have 10 staff, 10 students for that program, it can't sustain itself. They need to have the good quality degrees around, first degrees particularly, around a core number of areas. And quality is important. Quality is important there. There have been concerns expressed to us that recently, since COVID, the university has now gone back to even classes, and they're online all the time. In fact, somebody said they have not, since they started their program, university, they've never gone in once. I don't know if it's true, but they haven't gone in once to the campus. It's online, all online. And so that's not the experience we want with a campus, because you're still sustaining this whole campus here. So a lot has to be reviewed there too. And the government, now that it will be using taxpayers' resources to fund the entire university, needs to ensure that we have solid leadership and also that we have value for money and the output, the quality of the degree is of a standard that is recognized everywhere in the world. So I believe that we need UG, but we need the other programs too. Similarly to the other type programs I mentioned, when they just complement, and BIT training, the technical colleges, the technical institutes that we are upgrading now, TVET education across the country, all of these form a network of training institutions that will deliver as quickly as possible on the goal of getting best education to our people. I don't know the exact dropout rate but you can ask Professor Opede. I wouldn't even venture to answer that on the Gold Scholarship Program.
But broadly speaking, sir, if I can...
But we do have dropout from UG too. So that is why we have to check if it's comparable.
What's the plan to increase the salaries of the lecturers at the university? Where do you want higher quality programs?
But this again drags me into an area that might be controversial, because is it just the only condition necessary to have a better quality education, higher salaries? Are you saying that the current lecturers are because they're getting a low salary, we're recruiting mediocre lecturers, and they're not delivering a high quality tuition. That's the conclusion I can draw from that? If you say that's the only condition of a better quality education. I think it is a number of things. So peer review publications, tenure and predictable tenure, a whole range of issues, oversight over lecturers too, to see for relevancy, for quality, for timeliness, for predictability. Students complain about all sorts of like there's this big range that they themselves can't predict between in the grading system. So I believe that it's a much more complex discussion when you look at quality. When Nigel Harris was the Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, and I was president, I asked him to focus on the quality. We're a collaboration. And he had identified Carrington to come here and to be the Vice Chancellor, and the focus should have been on quality. And there were several indicators that were listed that they had to look at. I think the place, it got culturally swamped, and what happened is that we lost that focus. So I think we need to return to that focus on the quality of the degree and the quality of the tuition and everything else. And if it necessitates higher remuneration to improve quality, then you have to do it. But I don't believe it's the only condition necessary. Yes, the population, the census figure is a bit low because a number of people were not captured by the census. So this is our internal, this is an internal estimate, and this is my internal estimate based on the number that we see on, like, of people coming for services, the number of households we saw. When we did our survey of the cash grant, we found a significantly higher number of households than we thought we had. So that's why I said maybe about 900,000. There was one. Oh, that's it. Yes.
Two budget-related matters and two court issues. Regarding the budget, the finance minister said there would be a survey of potential resources in offshore blocks. Can you confirm if this would include a relinquished portion of Stabroek? And is there any plan to engage bilateral partners such as the UK or India on one-on-one negotiations regarding the blocks this year? Also on the budget, the finance minister revealed the government's plans to increase the debt ceiling as well as to revise the withdrawal rule for the NRF. How does government plan to ensure that the country stays free from the clutches of the pre-source as well as the resource curse? So those are the two budget-related issues.
Okay.
You want me to ask the court?
And then you can go. You have some more?
Yes, the court matters. Citizens have approached the court to see the $2 billion parent company guarantee, and they have been facing a lot of difficulties trying to do so after 7 months. Do you think they have a right to see this document? Do you agree with their position that it should be made public? And on a separate issue, can you say why the government is appealing a judge's decision on the unlawful deductions from the salaries of nurses in Linden?
Okay.
You want to? Yeah.
Okay. So the survey. Let me start with the survey. So somehow the language in the budget may lead people to believe that it's seismic that we're doing. It's internal survey using an assessment of all the available data, because what we what we have done, we have the data in different places. And so part of our preparation for the auction was to get all the data into a data room to be available to the potential bidders. We found significant gaps where in submission of data by some of the licensees, and also the availability of data and where they are now. And so it is to survey all the data available now to us, so that we can prepare for the next round, the next auction round. We have no immediate plan to do seismic work funded by the government of Ghana. No immediate plan. Should that change, we'll let you know. Secondly, this would include, the data would include that of the relinquished, to be relinquished portion of the Stabroek block, what they have. On the debt ceiling, yes. So you heard the Minister of Finance explain. So the debt ceiling is largely raised to facilitate some of these big projects we have, because they would temporarily push up the debt, like the gas to energy project. It's reflected in the budget, one thing. So people sometimes confuse a reflection in the budget or program in the budget with its financing. So every project that is in the budget has to be financed. So I mentioned, so there are different pools of resources. So revenue excluding the NRF is 400 and something billion. When we add the withdrawal from the NRF, it would be $600 odd billion. If you add the GRIF money and the sale of forest carbon, it's at 600 and something billion. That's why we're saying that 60-something% of the budget will be financed from own resources. The rest has to be loan, a combination of domestic and foreign loans. The loan, so we budgeted the gas to energy project, $80 billion here in the budget, but its funding will be from the loan from Exim Bank. So that's when we have to go for the loan now. We run up to the hurdle of the debt ceiling. So that has to be shifted upwards to accommodate that. As I pointed out, that we see this intense period of build out of a lot of our infrastructure that are urgently needed to support continued growth in the economy too. But once they're completed, you would see a steep fallout in the budget. The budget would be reduced significantly in the outer years, because once you finish building the hospitals, the 12 hospitals and the bridges and the power plant, then you don't need to expand anymore. So whether we will bring the ceiling down back in the future again or not is we can think about it, but right now it's only for that purpose. Now, even with us raising the debt ceiling, it doesn't mean that we are going to actually borrow that sum to the level of the ceiling. It doesn't mean that. As you can see now, you will see from the financing aspect of the budget, if you go to the macro tables in the budget, they're in the estimates and they're reflected in the budget speech too. So when you see the size of the fiscal deficit, you will then see financing. and it will tell you basically how the debt will grow there. And it's not anywhere near the ceiling that we'll raise. But this is for future year. You don't want to go back and do it every year, because we should have done it in the past, but we just raised it a little bit, and then you have to go back and go through the same arguments over and over again. It is to facilitate that. But will our debt, our borrowing be unsustainable? The answer is clearly no, as I pointed out to you now. We have some of the best debt fundamentals in the world in terms of our capacity to repay and our financing. Similarly with the NRF rule, we were very conservative at the beginning, because right now we're borrowing to invest and we're saving a higher portion. We made it clear that once we get up to basic minimum, like a 3 billion threshold, and you will see that reflected in the proposal that will go. Beyond that, the saving rate starts going steeply up, the amount you save. But below that level, you have all these calls by the opposition. In fact, I hope they should support this. And a number of people who've been saying, why save this money? And then you're borrowing also to why save the magnitude, not that you shouldn't save any. And then you're borrowing basically to finance these projects. So it reflects that. Christopher Ram should be happy, because not that we believe that it was a storm in a teacup over this overstatement of the NRF, his big thing about whether it's overstated and all of that. Should be happy then we're taking more of it to the Treasury now, so the NRF wouldn't be overstated, as he's complaining about. So this is important. So will that cause, will the change in the ceiling or the debt ceiling or the NRF revision of the NRF rule cause us to suffer the Dutch disease? And the answer is clearly no. We have laid out a sustainable framework that will not cause serious pressure on the exchange rate to appreciate. So that is a key issue too, as you asked. Whether this spending here or the way we're spending or the utilization of the fund will cause, the Dutch disease. So the answer is no. On the $2 billion guarantee, so I spoke with the EPA about this. Their biggest concern is about the avalanche of requests that this could trigger. In principle, I don't see a problem with a guarantee, because the guarantee is there, will be made public. But they, as an institution, I can't override the institution. The institution believes that's why it says to its lawyers, under the law, there are documents we have to make public, and there are documents we don't have to make public. And this is one of those documents, because where does it stop? And if we start doing this, every day we will have a request for not just oil and gas sector, but every sector, for documents that are submitted in this manner to us, often. So it's a party between the two parties are the person who submitted the document and the EP are party to the transaction, but then third parties may want to intervene all the time. So for me, publicly, it is a matter for the court. If the court believes that the public interest to see this document overrides their fealty to their law, and the court rules that way, then they would have to make it public. So that is a matter for the court. I don't want, as a politician, to override the agency, their concern. The thing with the healthcare, the nurses in Linden, so I'm told that this was in the COVID period, and a number of nurses were disciplined for various offenses. And the disciplinary measure could take several forms: termination, suspension, or, as the Labor Ministry advised, deductions. That they lawfully chose that route, the deductions, when they absented themselves. And the court ruled in the favor of the nurses. But they believe that there's a big industrial principle at stake here. An industrial principle that if this were to succeed, then they will not be able to utilize that tool, which is available often in the collective bargaining agreements or in the laws of the country, to discipline staff. So you can discipline through various forms, that is termination, suspension, deductions. And they applied one of these tools, which is the deduction method, to that when the nurses were absent. And so it is a bigger issue at stake here, not just the nurses from Linden, but an industrial principle that is at stake here. Therefore, the appeal.
Just a follow-up to the first question that I asked, and a final question. You said that there's a process to put all of the information together from the survey for the next auction. Is that next auction likely this year?
Could be. Well, let me don't commit myself to it as yet. It could be. Timing is important too. We have to speak to our advisors, and also, we have to conclude the first one. And as I said last week, that they have a deadline of, I think, the end of this month to submit some additional information. Thereafter, we should decide whether the agreements are going to be signed up or not. So we need to conclude that. We're also going to talk to our advisors to see what's happening in the world of auctions and what's the right timing, because they're more attuned to what's happening globally. And we have to fit any auction that we may pursue in that context. Then the relinquishment of the Stabroek block, which we're hoping would be part of the next auction, will happen, I think, is it October or October? So we have to examine whether outside of the Stabroek block we can sustain another auction with the properties we have now, and then have, since that will happen in October, then leave that for the next auction, or wait until those properties come in and then come back to the state and then go with an auction including those properties. So these are things that we have to decide on. We also have, we've been for weeks now, you saw the request for proposal for the exploring the market for the gas development. We're just, as I explained to you, we're just exploring the market, given that we've had a lot of approaches at the bilateral level, and we wanted to do it in an open fashion to see anyone who may have any interest could express that interest through a public open process. We're also going out to tender soon for the audit up to the end of 2023. So you should see that go out very, very soon. Okay. Yes,
For
sure.
me, the recent EITI report, the Guyana EITI report, said that there is a higher perception of governance corruption in 2022, as well as a decline in citizens' right to speak freely. How do you feel about these two findings in that document?
You know, last week I actually walked with it, and this week again, because Kaichur has been at it a while. At a while. So I can't find a 2022 EITI report. I'm finding a 2021. So I asked Ashley Singh, you have it? He Googled my staff. So I can only find, this is Kaichur News Story. And it has a 2022 document. So the 2021 report that came out at the end of 2023, the 2021 Guyana report came out in 2023, and we're in 2024 now. So that's why I believe that we may have a difference here. So this is the report that I have for this in 2021. And this report says on control of corruption. So in 2019, we were ranked 105 in the world, 101, and we're ranked 105 now. So we decline. Okay? There was a decline. But and then on government effectiveness, 131 in 2019, we're 121, so improvement. On political stability and absence of violence, terrorism, 132 in 2019, we're now 122, so improvement. Regulatory quality, 148 in 2019, we're 138 now, improvement. Rule of law, 132 in 2019, 129 now, improvement. And voice and accountability, 95 in 2019 and 93 in 2021. So on government effectiveness, political stability and absence of violence, terrorism, regulatory quality, rule of law, and voice and accountability, 5 of the 6 indicators we've had an improvement. And the control of corruption is the one that declined from 101 to 105. But you recall, so it has in 2017, Guyana was 130. So what happened in 2019 on corruption? And I sat here and I brought to you a document that was sent by TIGI and published in 2019 to the Transparency International from the local chapter, sent by the president of the local chapter, which said that, 1, the Integrity Commission was working well and properly functioning, and there had been an improvement in the Integrity Commission, when in fact, for the first time in 20 years, the APNU did not submit statements. They had 3 years of no submission from 2015 to 2018 with no submission to the Integrity Commission. So that report from the local chapter lied. I called them out and asked them to withdraw the report or explain it. Until now, they have not explained it, how they would put a report and send it abroad to say corruption declined in 2019 and talk about the Integrity Commission improving and not mention that you had no submissions contrary to law. Secondly, they said that there's greater transparency in the oil and gas sector because all the contracts have been published. When you know differently here, that there was a big outcry about the contract, the signing bonus, it was not published. The environmental permits were never published. We published all of these when we got into office. There was a fight from civil society and others to get the documents. That was a blatant lie in the report too. And the third element, they said that the government stopped an illegal parking meter. You know, the parking meter scandal. And you know it was civil society that stopped that. You can get a copy of this report and still ask the local chapter of the TIGI why they have not withdrawn that report that was secretly sent up 2019 on the APNU to Transparency International. And I believe that helped the decline from 130 to 101 because of that 2019 report. So I don't see us a 105 here. Now, when we expose that, because we exposed it in 2020 and 2021, I think it worked against us because we said it's not true. So I believe on this here, this is the last report that we found online, and this is the one that shows improvement in almost all the areas.
Good afternoon, Anassa Williams,
Okay. All right. Do you want to?
Kaiser News. Just four quick questions. On the Skyline Sugar Factory, was it not a conflict of interest to have Booker Tate involved in the design of the Skyline Sugar Factory, the evaluation of the bids, and then also be the project manager of the very project that it designed and helped pick the contractor? Secondly, how do you respond to the criticism that the only reason why there is no petroleum commission in place is because you're obsessed with control of decision-making and circumspect about independent oversight of the sector? Thirdly, was the former Suriname's president, Desi Bouterse, a friend of yours, and would the government consider granting him asylum? And lastly, the Guyana Civil Aviation Authority has reported that 9 of its air traffic services staff members, including 7 air traffic controllers, have resigned within the past year. We understand they're more than likely to leave to take up similar jobs overseas. How does the government plan to address staff retention issues at the GCAA?
So it's the obsession with control, Jagdeo's obsession with control. It's whether Bouters is my friend. And what's the other? Oh, GCAA, and Scotland. Okay, yes. So on the Scotland Sugar Factory, I see the tune is changing now because, so Booker Tate was managing, and therefore management had a role in the evaluation of the bids. And so now that we established that they were hired to do the feasibility study, to design the factory, that they help assess the bids, and then a separate Booker Tate team, not the management team, they was selected to oversee the design, the construction, or the project. So because they designed the building, or they participated in the design of the building, I think it was thought at the board level, because this is a decision of the board, that it would be best to have them oversee the construction of the building. But we've clearly established now that this was done by the best technical people with no political involvement. We've established now that they were sued by this government, the PPP government, for not fulfilling their role to ensure that the Chinese contractors, or to, first of all, to review the design. In fact, they reviewed the design and approved elements of the design that failed, like the pond dumpers, etc., that couldn't allow the throughput. And then not to oversee the contractor to see that they fulfilled the requirements of the contract. When we sued them, APNU, we lost the case, APNU didn't pursue it. I asked the last time, did you ask, could someone, especially the Kaichur News, ask APNU why they did not defend the national interest? By clearly a breach on the part of the Booker T team, why they didn't defend the national interest on this project. So I don't see the conflict of interest is not the question here. It is the professional services that they should have offered. And no, it's not obsession with control that why the Petroleum Commission is not in place as yet. We made it clear that the model in different countries are for managing the oil and gas sector vary. And that ultimately we'd like to get to a petroleum commission, but that we are pushing through the reforms now. And it requires a lot of cabinet input and also there are a lot of policy making time. And therefore, we can achieve the framework which we have had success in. We can achieve getting that framework put in place swiftly without compromising any function that the commission would have engaged in. That is why we said. So we have managed, and if you look at the success that we've had, not because as the guy who said, what's it, 4 men on a table or something like that, not because of Jagdeo, it's a government effort. We have put in place, made some serious changes, a petroleum activities bill, you know that, replacing the 1986 one. We did it through public consultations. We now drafting the regulations, the safety regulations, the environmental regulations, which will be promulgated soon to support a modern legislation. We've expanded the scope for regulation in that law. NRF, the local content law, which has had great success. You saw about 6,000 people now are employed in the oil and gas sector. The report from the local content sector. This has happened increasingly so because of that law. And the other measures that we've taken, the auction, etc., the reform of the PSA. So we're really pleased with the framework. We have mentioned clearly we're now moving. So this belaboring every week, oh, they don't have the meters yet. We said that's what we are coming to. Every week, I'm sure they can't put in a meter to measure the thing, the oil and gas. We are now going out formally for a company to do that on our behalf, but the Bureau of Standard is there on site, and we do reconcile the sales number and the production number, and our auditors tend to do that. So the Petroleum Commission will happen, but it will happen at a time when we have some level of capacity and maturity in the sector. Bouters, I have a lot of friends around the region. So I saw Ralph Gonzalez wrote the president of Venezuela and said, I spoke with Fanali and my friend Jagdeo. That should cause a major problem too. And just a letter which went a few days ago when there were this issue about Ralph was posing in front of behind some picture of Venezuela. And I consider a lot of the Caribbean leaders friends, etc. So what's the problem with that? I'm not sure, I'm not aware that former President Bouters has requested asylum in Guyana. So where is this issue coming from? So if that is an issue when it happens, I'm not dealing with conjecture and wildness, although I'm dealing with Starbuck Kaichur news here in any case. So and what's the GCA, right? GCA, I don't have all the details there about people who have left, but retention is important too. And that's a crucial agency to make sure that our airports, the civil aviation sector is properly managed. I don't have the details of how many people left. I don't know who they left and when they left. So it would be now wise of me to give a comment on that. You can ask the subject minister, Juan Edgehill, and he would be able to deal with that issue. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Catherine Schmidt. I'm from Energy Intelligence. I'm visiting for a few days. Thank you for having me. Wanted to follow up on the RFP on the open gas infrastructure. Can you tell me a little bit more about the engagements you've had bilaterally about the parties that have approached? And is there any update on the engagement with Suriname potentially for cross-border potential? I have a couple follow-ups. Should I?
Okay, yes.
Secondly, wanted to see if you could reinforce the target for GTE to come online, at what point the government expects for its part of the infrastructure to become operational. I know Brazil has recently joined OPEC in a consultative role rather than being part of the group. Is that something Guyana would consider? Finally, what are your major oil policy items on your agenda for this year? Thank you.
Okay. So the request for proposal, I'd explained earlier at earlier press conferences that we have been written to by a number of companies. Some have approached us directly, requested meetings with us. I don't want to name the companies now, but they're claiming that they have the capacity to develop the gas resources in a speedy manner, and they have all the resources, the financial resources to make that happen. They believe that the timing is good now, given that the world has agreed that gas has to be a transitional fuel, and that the project, if it's not done very early, then it may lose some of its feasibility in the longer run. We share that view that the project, the gas resources must be monetized. Two, that given net zero and this window of opportunity, that this project, if it were to happen, should be done urgently. We have discussed this matter with ExxonMobil. We said to them, we believe that we should move to monetizing the gas resources. They continue to claim that a lot of this is associated gas, which is a fact, with the exception of Pluma, which has more gas than oil. And that they need a significant part of this gas to keep the reserve quality going. This is a discussion we're having with them, and we'll continue to have. We believe, however, that we may find enough gas to start the process of monetization. We can achieve both objectives, keep reserve quality going and also develop a purely gas-related industry, either for exports or for value-added activities here in Guyana. So we had a discussion paper that went out. We had a lot of comments on the discussion paper. We're now getting all those comments from oil companies, gas companies, etc. And we're going to finalize the strategy. But the strategy basically is to monetize as quickly as possible. So we share a lot of the thinking with people who've approached us. But we did not want to be accused of working only with individuals because we don't know whether there are better proposals out there. And most likely you'd have to select one of these. So we thought even before we complete the grass strategy, since we know our objective, let us explore what the interest is out there and whether it's serious interest. And then we can have that discussion with Exxon because Exxon will have to be part of this too because they're 50% owners of the gas. And we can then sit down in a tripartite way and have a discussion around specific projects. So that's the approach that we have taken now because we wanted greater transparency. We don't want people just to send a piece of paper or come and see us because there are lots of people who want to come all the time. So we are saying, put in your proposal there. We'll assess it through that process.
What's your timeline for it?
We want, there's urgency in this given what I mentioned, but there are lots of moving parts here, and there are also lots of issues we have to still resolve before we can get to a project. So we will focus on it intensely this year. So this is part of our agenda to focus on it intensely this year, but I don't want to tie us down to a particular time frame, given that there's so many issues still to be resolved. The gas to energy project, the project is moving forward. We've had a delay, not because of finance, not because that the Exxon has not made an investment decision as yet, because some sections of the local media have been carrying this, but because of a slight delay, because of the handing over of the site. The handing over of the site. So the contractor, we had a particular timeline, and that slipped by, I think, about 3 months. We handed it about 3 months later. So we anticipate that's the kind of delay that we, at this point in time, we will encounter. We believe the pipeline would be completed. A lot of work has been done. Spoke with the contractors a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, and they said that they're on track. The turbine should arrive in April of this year, and because they had ordered these turbines, etc. So all the parties are working towards bringing this in by early 2025, and that's the timeline for that project. On OPEC, our position has not changed. We'll stay away from it for the time being. Our position has not changed. Was there a fourth issue? Or those are RFP, the GTE Brazil joining OPEC? I think there was.
major oil policy items.
Oh, yes, the major. So I don't want to repeat what I said earlier, but we have done a lot of the framework sort of things that we promised in our manifesto that we're going to do. So reforming the NRF, Petroleum Activities Bill, local content law, the conditions for the auction, reforming the fiscal rate, the PSA. These are all big items. Strengthening the EPA and the environmental permits. So now we believe this year we have to focus more on greater monitoring and contract compliance. So the new law would necessitate and clarify data flow between companies. So we're to focus heavily on timeliness of data, the completeness of data, the assessment of the data when it comes from the oil companies, that it's not just stored in a repository. We will then look at monitoring of production. These are all issues to focus on this year. The local content law, we're now doing a complete review to see what worked, what didn't work, what was effective, what was not effective, the loopholes that were exploited in the law, and then we'd have to make adjustments accordingly. So there, I mentioned before, the gas strategy is another important element. So these are just some of the, and of course, the auction, if we can have another auction before year end, we'll probably do one. Depends on the success here too, in the first one. So these are some of the items on our agenda. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hello.
Afternoon. Yes. Yes.
Vashani from the newsroom. Just 3 quick questions for me. Just for some clarity on the measure to take VAT and duty off of sport equipment, what exactly is being considered sport equipment? And does that also include equipment used to maintain facilities and even perhaps vehicles for racing? That's one. Secondly, you mentioned the 4 smaller helicopters, but is any consideration being given to replacing the one that was crashed? And finally, unrelated to the budget, but Minister Benny yesterday spoke about a rise in gun crime, but he said that there wouldn't be an amnesty. But would the government, are you saying the government, can you say if the government would consider a gun amnesty to get the guns off the streets?
The amnesty did not work on the APNU. Why would a criminal, if this gun has a record and we have the bullets and we can trace the bullets, bring in a gun and give it to the government to convict themselves? So amnesty did not work. That was one of the last government's key crime-fighting measures. The next one was to bring some dogs in and horses from abroad. You recall, as ridiculous as they sound now, not technology, not putting up cameras with software that could predict crime and all of that we're going for now, the modern technology, but to bring in dogs and horses and stuff. That was Ramjatan kind of proposal. So I believe strong enforcement. If you don't have permit for a weapon, then there should be strong enforcement. And if you're found with a weapon, then you should suffer the consequences. Enforcement. It's clear they like this amnesty business. It has not been considered in the government, but from our history, we've seen, and recent history, it didn't work. The VAT equipment?
On sport?
On sport, yes. That will have to be, so clearly, I don't think it's vehicles. But the GRA, I think they submitted a list to the Ministry of Finance. It would be best, they can probably give you that list of some of the things. But when we spoke with the individuals, you have basic stuff like even balls and stuff like that, they have a VAT on it. And we realized that would not support what we are trying to do. So if you see in the budget this year, I didn't focus heavily on it, but we have upwards of about $2.5 billion, including some rollover, for the upgrade of facilities around the country. In Georgetown, we're We have 34 grounds, community grounds, that are, every one of them now is being upgraded. We plan to put in fence and light on these grounds, etc. In Berbice, we're doing a large number, so to support that activity. And a lot of been put into culture too. You saw a significant allocation for culture. Those are the two questions. Oh, yes, that decision, ultimately, I think you'd have to have other helicopters with capacity to carry large numbers of people. What model, I don't know, because that needs to come out of the assessment that is being done now. But what they found now, I was part of a conversation where they said that these same helicopters, the smaller ones, they have low operating costs, and they can use a lot to train more of our pilots too. So, and the smaller ones. Significantly, the cost is a fraction of the larger ones. So the pilots can be trained here to a lot of training, as well as the security aspect of it. They can be equipped to enhance security significantly. So that assessment is still being done, whether they will go back for the 412 or have a different model. Not that there's anything wrong with the 412, because this was a new aircraft. You know, you had this fool Ramjatan saying that we bought a 50-year-old aircraft, helicopter. These were new helicopters bought directly from the company, not through middlemen, like they did on the APNU, several pieces of equipment and aircrafts that they bought through middlemen that never work. Every engagement is directly with Bell. Every engagement is directly with the company. This was done in the past, and it's happening again. The security people are directly in touch with Bell. Yes, please.
Sheriff Belgrave, Culture News. Dr. Jagdeo, what are your thoughts on the Guyanese litigants who have written the U.S. Exim Bank to stop funding for the Gas to Shore project? Are you concerned that this could further delay the review for the loan?
You really want to know my thoughts on these people? Yeah. All right. Well, they're hopelessly misguided. And people who have done nothing for this country, who have cushy lives, all of them, their bread is well buttered. I think somebody, yeah. Hey, that's for Glenlal. You're not on the phone like Glenlal listening into the conference. That's not Glenlal. So their bread is well buttered, every one of them. They live great lives and all of them. And they don't care that this project will deliver cheaper electricity to our business community and to all of our citizens, that they would have to pay half of what they're paying now for power, which could start as much as next year. They don't care that we will save $100 million per year by doing this project. They don't care that we'd have cheaper cooking gas and we'll be exporting cooking gas. They don't care that this project can pay for itself. The economics are so good. Their biggest concern at the beginning, we are causing climate change. So the world, they don't care that the U.S. has produced the most and exported the most gas last year. They produced the most gas ever. And that Qatar is making some of the biggest investment in gas, and the world has agreed that gas is transitional fuel. They're stuck here because I believe many of them are financed. They get resources from groups that want the developed world to remain, or the developing world undeveloped, who have no resonance, their voices have no resonance in policy making in the big countries. They can't stop the U.S. growing its production of fossil fuel, but they come to countries like ours and have agents who do this sort of thing. And that group fall into that category. And they're trying to block this regardless of its impact on our people. When it's demonstrated that our emissions would have a negligible impact on climate change. In fact, we're going to be net positive in terms of emission, even in 2050. Now, much less in 2050. So they will continue to do this. They'll continue to do this. The same thing with Glenn Lal too. He does this. He doesn't care about this project or anything because probably, I don't know if you pay the full bill there at Kite Shore or he gets a waiver too. But they can afford it. The second thing is that there might be individual interests. I gather one of the persons who asked the lawyer to write ExxonMobil has a case against the government to stop the gas-to-energy project because we are acquiring her land there to pass the pipeline through. So it is not only country, it is an individual interest that is playing out here. So the Exim Bank is very much aware of what's going on here in Guyana. They have technical people who follow every single day what's going on. They can discern serious interest or serious concern from concern of a propagandistic nature or a doctrinaire nature. And in this case, that's what it's doing. And all they have to do is to check the same names on every issue, and you will see them appear on every other matter. So I doubt it's going to have any impact on Exim Bank and the provision of the loan. Now, the bank needs to satisfy itself, which it is doing through its own due diligence process, that the project is feasible because they're financing it, and that it's environmentally sound. And they're doing that on their own. And I believe that at the end of that exercise, before they go to the board, that they would find it positive on both counts, independent of what the loonies say. So this is my view on these individuals.
You have told us that certain issues, certain matters we have in the oil and gas sector, we should follow up with the Minister of Natural Resources. But we have raised some matters with him now, and he has not responded a month ago. What's your advice? Should we continue forwarding these issues to him, or?
Right. Yeah, I think you should raise the issues with the minister. Yes, definitely. May not have had the time, but let's see. He may not have the same patience that I have too, and sometimes you all wear my patience thin here with his in Kaichor News, but I guess it's not the same ring fencing thing. A man must be just tired if it's ring fencing and interest rate. The same sort of thing about ring fencing and interest rate. He just would ignore it. I hope it's not that, and it's more serious issues. Anything? Yes.
Good afternoon, Vice President.
Good afternoon.
Kimal King, Oil Now. On the proposal that the government is going to take to Parliament to revise the Natural Resource Fund's withdrawal formula, the fund closed 2023 with about 1.97 billion. Could you say just how much of that the government wants to withdraw to support the budget in 2024?
Okay. So So the thing is that it has not gone to the parliament as yet. The legislation has now been drafted. In the budget, we have it's about around 1.2 billion, just around 1.2 billion, that based on the current formula that has to be withdrawn. Any increase on that will only change the financing because the projects are already budgeted for. It will change the financing component. So I don't want to disclose as yet until the minister goes, but in compliance with the law, we budgeted on the basis of the existing formula. If it has retroactive application, you will see the number, but it will not change any project. It will just change the financing component. So you will see it when it happens. That's what I'd say now. I can't tell you that at this stage. The Minister of Finance should say that.
On that very matter, would it not be sort of a bad look that, last year was the first year
Yeah.
that formula was applied, because in the first year they took out everything.
Yeah, I think it was, as I said at the beginning, that it was conservative. It was conservative, very, very conservative.
Conservative?
Yes, the conservative, yes.
Okay. In the estimates of budget 2024, I see some different numbers under the gas to shore line item than was represented in 2023's estimates. With respect to the portion of the money that is supposed to come from foreign financing, last year it had about 640 something million US. With respect to, that's the money that you're going to request from the Exim Bank. But this year it shows something vastly reduced, about the equivalent of like $320 million. Does that indicate that the government is reducing its request to the Exim Bank?
No, we have not reduced the request. A lot of it is timing. Timing too, and some of it will be retroactive financing, because what we've done, we paid the first 100 million, right? So that's why we requested 660. But since then, we have been making payments from the Treasury because the loan has not been approved as yet. So, but then the full sum will be secured, and we'll have it a retroactive financing, basically. So it's a timing issue too. It is how much of it we expect to be done this year versus next year. So you may have, remember, at that time, 2023, we had end December at the end of the project. So you had to budget all the money for the end of the project at end December 2024. If it is shifted, say, to the first quarter of 2025, then some of the money will shift over to 2025's budget.
On the invitation to interested investors for the gas development infrastructure, you had talked before during previous press conferences about not being satisfied with what the priority or the pace of Exxon on developing the gas resources. Does this invitation indicate that the government will turn to Exxon and ask them to maybe relinquish their gas fields, the non-associated gas? And I'm trying to get an understanding.
The first priority now is to have that discussion with Exxon on the development. We need them to share our view that these resources must be developed and developed urgently because of this timeline. Next, it would be the availability of the gas and how much. We believe that gas must be made available for this venture of this nature. Thirdly, is that would they want to participate in the project? as a developer, or would they want to just to sell their gas, their share of the gas, to the project, right? Because if the project is prepared as so they can, these are decisions that have to be made by them. So that is why I said that there's so many moving parts earlier that we wanted to allow. I didn't want to tie myself down to a timeline, but they understand the urgency of this, and at the end of the day, we have to look at what's good for Guyana. That's what's important for us.
Understanding of if there's a hurry with respect to the publication of the invitation for proposals, because it's been published before the finalization of the gas strategy. Won't investors...
No, the two are not the same. The gas strategy and the request for proposal, I've explained that work can go in parallel. That work can go in parallel. You have heard from me about the thinking in the government. You've heard about why we believe that we have to move early and we have to get the best interests involved. And that is why we're trying to, through a public process, secure that best interest. There's a lot between that, securing the best interest, and finalization of the project that have to be completed. Parallel, the gas strategy will be completed, but this will take some time for that to happen. We believe we can move parallel to each because we already know the objective of the gas strategy, the objective of it.
Is whether those interested investors won't need to be guided by what is in the strategy.
They can say that. We give them guidance on what we expect them to put forward as part of the proposal. Pretty detailed guidance. If you look at the request for proposal, it's pretty detailed. If they're serious, I think we may be able to separate the ones who are serious from those who are not serious here.
Okay.
Because you have a number of people who would just write you and say, I want to do this gas facility. And you ask, what's the source of funding? And they say, why? The local banks. The local banks. And then you say to them, our aggregate deposit is not enough to, all the deposits in the banking system is not enough to finance this. So clearly, those are not going to be able to respond to the RFP. Or if they do respond, they get wiped out. We don't have to then waste a lot of time with people who are sometimes into everything. They apply for everything. So we believe that the process could be parallel. You recall we did that for even the gas-to-energy project, that we went out for RFP a long time back to see what we will utilize the remaining gas for. And we're still looking at this, and we're angling now towards a particular approach, which is fertilizer, the fertilizer plant for the excess gas that we'll have. So that is what we're angling towards that, because there are lots of proposals. You remember basalt fiber and a whole range of other things. And we now believe that the biggest value to our country is to utilize the additional gas beyond as part of the 50 million cubic per day that would not be utilized. All of it would not be utilized. The remainder can sustain, we believe, a mid-size fertilizer plant that would have an impact on our farming sector here. So we did this in the past too.
Finally, the study that's going to be done using your available internal data to determine the resources offshore.
It's a review of.
So it's going to be done internally or by a consultant, is what I'm trying to get.
They could hire a consultant, but it's not like seismic. I wanted to differentiate it from seismic study versus, because that's the impression Normally, a survey, if you say you're surveying, it creates that impression. So we are not, internal doesn't mean our own people do it, but it means we can hire a consultant to work with you on this. But I just wanted that clarification.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Will government be working with the commercial banks to write off loans that were taken by students from the banks to study at UG, as opposed from the student loan facility through the Ministry of Finance?
So if they took the loan from UG, a bank, to pay UG, and they don't have, so this is a different situation. This is for people who have paid already. You recall last week it was, I think, I spoke about this.
I'm talking about people who are still paying banks for student
yes,
loans.
but that means they're fully paid off the university, so they're paying the bank. So I said that we have to think how we will assist those people, because it might be unfair to them, those who paid now. So you didn't pay your loan. You decided, I'm not paying back anything. And you're getting your loan written off because you didn't pay. Another person who worked hard and paid off their loan, they're not going to benefit from this because they've paid off their loan. And last week I acknowledged that it is something we have to think about, and it would be a bit unfair to those people. So last week I dealt with it, but we still have to come up with a policy to try to help those people too. We have not done so as yet, but I openly acknowledge that it is a problem for those people.
Okay, I thought your previous comments were confined only to the student loan facility through the government as opposed to the commercial banks.
No, but Dennis, if they took a loan from a bank, it meant they paid off the university.
Fair enough.
So when we give a waiver at the university, they don't owe the university, but they owe the bank now. So that is the issue. So the waiver there doesn't help them. Or if they got the money from their parents or their work and paid it back, right? Then they would have paid off. So you understand the difference. So it's a bit unfair to those people. And we have to get the numbers and see what we can do to assist them too.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.